listeners, and welcome to an interview episode of the Arts Management and Technology Lab podcast. My name is Alyssa, and I am the podcast producer. In this episode, we feature a project based here in Pittsburgh called MoonArk, the highly collaborative and collective structure and museum that will make its way to the moon in 2021. I sit down with Professors Matt Zywica, Vitone, and Mark Baskinger to discuss the project's process and purpose in greater detail. We hope you enjoy this episode brought to you by Antilab. So, I'm here today with Matt Zywica, Assistant Teaching Professor, Vitone, Associate Professor, and Mark Baskinger, Associate Professor and the Project Director for MoonArk, all at Carnegie Mellon University School of Design. Gentlemen, if you could take a moment to introduce yourselves for our listeners.
I'm Mark Baskinger, Project Director for the MoonArk.
And my name's Matt Zywica, and I'm a Project Manager for the MoonArk.
Vitone, I'm a Project Manager as well.
Okay, so today we're going to be discussing MoonArk, the mini time capsule and museum for humankind. According to the MoonArk website, this is an epical artifact designed to communicate forward across time and space. This is the first museum of its kind that's being sent to the moon, and it will be sent at 2021 via Astrobotics precision landing system named Peregrine. And actually, Astrobotics is based here in Pittsburgh and is sponsored by NASA. Okay, so within MoonArk, there are 4 chambers, and each chamber is ranged from samples of earthly materials to music clips to metallic structures to visual arts. And the goal of this project is that it's designed to last thousands of years and will be discovered by future humankind. So tell me, gentlemen, how did the idea for MoonArk get started?
The MoonArk project began about 10 years ago. Just shortly after CMU decided to compete for the Google Lunar X Prize competition. And that initial venture spawned Astrobotic as a spin-off company to make lander platforms and bring private payload to the moon. And initially, it began with legendary roboticist and educator Red Whittaker reaching out to the College of Fine Arts to find out who might be involved or who could be involved in bringing some sort of cultural aspects to this momentous initial launch for CMU and for Astrobotic and really for private space ventures. And Red connected with also legendary educator and space artist Lowry Burgess, former dean of the College of Fine Arts. And ultimately, through their collaboration, they initiated the MoonArts group. And within the MoonArts group, in about 2009, 2010, a variety of projects were created. A public call for participation went out internationally. And over the following years, that effort sort of whittled down or was fine-tuned to become the MoonArk project. So the MoonArk went from cultural payload that was an add-on to the lunar mission to becoming the cultural element that's going to the moon for the first private mission to the moon in 2021.
All right, excellent. And this is a process that took about 9 years to develop for all of the aspects of the structure to come together.
Yep.
All right, cool. So within this project, you worked with maybe about 300 people from all around the world to gather some of the artifacts and create some of the artwork that went into MoonArk. How did you go about collaborating and communicating your ideas to make the museum that exists today?
I think it began based on need. In the very beginning, as we started to kind of discuss and further develop what this, we knew that it was going to be an object. We knew that what was required to get this object to the moon and for it to exist on the moon for an extended period of time would involve some very harsh conditions. And I think at the very beginning, the first people that we began to bring into the project probably involved that side of things, the more sort of technical challenges that involved materials and crafting, manufacturing type processes for what these various pieces might be that are included with it. So I would say like the very first person that we brought into the project would have been Mark Rooker, right? Yeah. And that was because very early on we realized that this object was going to have to be quite small, and we narrowed some of our various materials down to different types of metals, and the more we got involved with types of metals and how they would respond to these conditions, we realized that we needed someone who specialized in areas of making very, very, very small, like jewelry almost type, like pieces and assemblies and different things like that. So we brought Mark Rooker into the project to help us eventually begin to fabricate it. So he was a part of the earliest conversations for what this object might look like, what it might be, and how we might begin to think about how we can accomplish actually making the something. I think almost even before some of the sort of content developments occurred.
Sure. We should say that Mark Rooker is a faculty member of James Madison University. He teaches jewelry and metal crafts.
So we wanted it to function kind of as a museum and kind of a representation of humans' kind of artistic capacity. But we also wanted it to be a beautiful object, a really nice, elegant object that we could give to the moon. And kind of Mark's jewelry work is so exquisite that he was really kind of helped drive, some of the form language conversations, and really made just this beautiful, elegant thing that we could then give to the moon.
When you offer the moon as a potential subject or landing spot for art to exist, right? It's really easy to attract people. A lot of people solicited us. They brought their artwork to us. They responded to the public call. They were friends of friends who were networked and connected with us, and really our efforts, we had a predominant narrative that we wanted to communicate. It was something about our natural context and how humans come from Earth and extend out into space physically, intellectually, emotionally, so forth. And so the artwork that we sort of collected and curated was largely driven by the need to support the narrative. And the narrative for us was very loose and open-ended. And so the project really became what it wanted to become through these collaborations and through the material exercises and experiments, and bringing people in like Mark Rooker with his expertise, and leveraging Dylan's expertise in photography and image making, and Matt's expertise in form language and semantics. We were really able to craft that narrative at an equal level of precision as Mark Rooker's jewelry. And so that for us, with a very organic, hand-built type, mentality, we assembled this thing. And it's not about technology. It's really about human endeavor. And so when you bring people into the fold to collaborate, that's sort of the mindset that they have, and that's what they respond to. So the artworks that we were able to curate, it was less about a yes and no decision, and it was more about yes and what if. And so if people brought us something like, hey, I'm working on these, these nanostructures, and they relate to the moon in this way, or they extend human capacity in this other way, we engage with them through the narrative and help them to see their work in new ways, to understand the richer connections to the work and the project, and then to identify opportunities for derivatives or expansion, extension, and so forth. So, I think there were very few pieces that we received that we said, oh yeah, that's great, we'll add it. And it was more about the narrative, working in support of the narrative, but having the dialogue and the communication with people, which ultimately turned to collaboration. So, it was not about, hey, artists, come on and join the MoonArk project. And it was more about, hey, who's doing interesting things and what are you doing and how do you think it relates? And then working together with them to co-develop and extend their work through ours.
So to build off what Mark says, I think it went two different ways. We'd have half the people that were incredibly enthusiastic about working with us on the project, and the other half of the people that would call up and kind of ask to manufacture something for us, and thinking we were completely unstable and completely in fantasy land. But no, we're doing this, and so it kind of went half and half. There's one overarching idea that kind of pulls through the 4 different chambers. We wanted to talk about kind of the human experience, much like if you were to walk through a city street and you were to smell perfume or you were to hear music, and we wanted to make this kind of multi-sensorial kind of experience. And there's 4 different chambers that kind of go from life on Earth, and it becomes pretty literal, rock samples, to the second chamber is the metasphere, the space between the moon and the Earth, and how we communicate, and the structure that allows us to communicate with one another, the structure that allows us to kind of make closeness, build bonds. The third chamber is the moon, which is about the moon as a muse, and the way we've used the moon is to inspire art through centuries. And then the last chamber is kind of about these things past the moon, things that we don't quite understand. And so we wanted to try to we wanted to remove kind of cultural context and things that kind of separated us, and we wanted to kind of embed kind of these universal experiences in these the different artifacts that we kind of attached to the MoonArk. So we wanted to not embed specific religions or specific cultures or specific identities. We wanted to kind of talk universally, these things that we all share, that kind of bring us together, and very much trying to be kind of this positive, uplifting kind of artifact of these kind of shared human experiences. So much of our conversation now is about the things that separate us and the differences between our cultures or our people or this or that, and we wanted to kind of rise above all that and kind of remove all that context from the narrative and kind of embed these universal kind of truths or universal experiences. So the beauty of listening to a piece of music, or to smell a flower for the first time, or those kind of artifacts that we share.
Yeah. So therefore, that makes the structure of MoonArk quite complex, and there's maybe about 100 or 200 touch points along the processes of manufacturing and testing that need to go into the structure. How did you handle so many details within this process?
Spreadsheets. Lots of spreadsheets.
Lots of meetings and dry erase boards.
Yeah. So we've been working on it for 9 years. 10 years, and so it's been a long time, and we tend to list things out a lot. We tend to have lots of lists in our studio, and sometimes we would visit an idea and it would disappear, and sometimes the same idea kind of kept coming up and coming up and coming up again, and those are the things that eventually made it into the actual arc.
Yeah, and sometimes it was the stuff that went inside of it was driven by the material that would be a part of the object, and sometimes it was driven by the way that we wanted people to experience the content. So there are elements that are a part of the object, you can hold the object in your hand and clearly see qualities to its form. But then there are also other elements that are a part of the object that you have to begin to look more closely at. So we tried to create this experience where as you were to maybe open up the object, you begin to look closer and closer and closer. So scale becomes a very important part of that experience, down to the degree where these sapphire discs that are etched in platinum, they contain information that you can barely see at human scale. You'll see kind of slight reflection as you sort of move the disc around, but it requires more than just your eyes to be able to see clearly everything that's a part of that. So this tiny little, what's the size of it, an inch and 5/8 or so, about. Yeah, sapphire disc you could either put it under a microscope or you can blow it up to wall size to be able to begin to read and view imagery and so on and so forth.
All right, cool. And can you talk about some of the technology that went into some of the design process, such as for the cages or the disc or the nano objects and the musical bits?
Sure. We, when you're designing something with so many different pieces, it's very difficult to design everything and then just put it together. Mm-hmm. So it was a progressive design. So we first started with the concept for the discs. Once we knew the technology and materiality for the discs and the dimension of them, we could then design the cage and then fill in with the other elements. I mean, we had a plan, but it's not until things are actually materialized that you can verify weight and performance and so forth. So there was a discovery process along the way. I mean, we collectively, through our team, we had the expertise to predict, and to plan accordingly. But once you have the real artifacts, it's very different. And so, one of the mysteries for us was, originally what processes were we going to use? And we thought, well, we really wanted to emphasize the role that the hand plays in fostering creativity and really making us human and how we interact and engage with the world. So, Mark Rooker's presence, the hand-generated components and elements that are in there are really important for us. The presence of the hand, is supremely important, and it's part of the narrative. That said, technical feasibility, it was just beyond human capacity to make these cages within an allowable time frame that would keep us on schedule. So we had to turn
purely by hand.
Yeah. So we had to turn to rapid prototyping and using metal sintering through an additive process to be able to achieve the cages. Mm-hmm. And that was an interesting process for us because we were originally working in titanium, and to get our strength to weight ratio we needed, we were hyper light, and yes, you can build it, but you couldn't remove the structure of the cage from the support material that gets built along with it. And so in the process of removing the cage, it would get destroyed. And so we had to redesign and change materials from titanium to aluminum, which opened up new pathways for us and new collaborations. But the complexity of the cage about 7-8 years ago when we were fabricating it was at the forefront of what we're able to do through additive manufacturing. And so most people that I spoke to, in calling production houses and engineering firms and fabricators, they all didn't want to touch it because they knew the risks, they knew the complexity. They said this is a high rate of failure. And then I stumbled upon, purely by chance, a small outfit in Indianapolis. And it's an engineering group, and they said, that's really interesting. All right, we're going to figure this out with you. And honestly, they looked at it, prototyped it in plastic, made 2 very small design changes. You couldn't even see them with your eye, right? And that changed it from unfeasible to feasible. And all it took was someone to say, hey, let's look at this for what opportunity is there, not the restraints or the constraints and restrictions that are already present in the design. So so that was good. So for us, I'll touch back on Dylan's point about the narrative too. The MoonArk as an entity is evidence of cooperation and collaboration. And that's the sentiment that we're putting forward for humanity. And it's evidence through every interaction that we had in the call for artwork, to the collaborations with artists, and then fabricators and manufacturers going out on a limb, working with us to achieve this very, very hypothetical object. We don't know if it could be built. We don't know if it'll last. We don't know if it'll make it to the moon. And to speculate and to have those aspirations and hope, really, it requires people to go out on a limb and to invest time and money of their own, and be willing to suspend disbelief. And so that was the main discovery for me, how art and fabrication and making and engineering and science and technology and all these people can come together around something so aspirational and achieve something collectively, even though everyone has a very, very small hand in it. collectively we've done this. And so it really, brings all these people and all the technologies and all the capability together, in a sort of poetic way.
I joke a lot in my life about the level of complexity that has to be in effect for me to move dumb pictures about a cat, like from my phone to my wife's phone, or just the level of infrastructure we have in order to communicate about how excited we are about the birthday party that we're at. And so that idea of how many people have to come together in order for something great to happen, and I'm not saying that this is a great project, but I'm saying that the process of making this project was great. And so working together with so many people in order to tell, as inclusive as a story as we could possibly make with the time constraints, and bringing in, Golan Levin's piece where he crowdsourced, multiple thousands of people drawing their picture to the moon, and they're having kind of an ownership in this. And then, the perfume artist that made a perfume, or the ballet that was constructed for this. So bringing in all these different people with the kind of blind faith that this was going to be something special, that became the special part of this project. Not necessarily the artifact, although I do love the artifact. It's that process and the conversations that we had along the way, both on campus at Carnegie Mellon, but also kind of out, towards the rest of the world. And, from people that are in the Mon Valley that are doing manufacturing with us to, the people in Greece that are, telling a different kind of story. So that all those different conversations along the way really made it kind of beautiful for me personally.
Yeah, and it's sometimes like a lot of the time it can be about the art, but when it comes to the process itself of making that art, like it becomes like really about the people too that go into the project. Cool. Okay, so one of the most fascinating parts of the MoonArk project that I learned about was your team's allowance to let the project grow organically. And I pictured it somewhat as taking an artistic idea or part of a plan and simply letting it go, or letting other people take the reins and let it be naturally derived. So I can imagine how this necessity came about, but did it present a massive challenge for your team?
It sounds corny, it sounds tropey, it sounds pretty goofy, but I think that I can speak for myself that it was just a genuine joy to spend this much time with the people that we got to spend this much time with. So the core group, the four of us, I think there was genuine trust, and there still is genuine trust between us. And there's, I think at this point for me, like a deep love and a caring for these people. And so that ability to be in a room and realize that your opinion was one with three other really great opinions, and to just work through that journey together and kind of trust each other. And, we would all get really random text messages in the middle of the night of an idea that popped into somebody's head, or an email that didn't really quite make sense because of, we were walking to another meeting. But, that staying open to one another and kind of communicating with one another is been a fantastic process. So I think that just that trust, it was never difficult. There was difficult moments, but it was never a difficult journey. It was actually the complete opposite for me. But I think all of us would say a different thing.
The challenge was enjoyable. Yeah, I don't know how to describe it other than that. We didn't know what this was supposed to be. If it was meant to be something, what it could become. And I think for whatever reason, all of us were open to that notion. So yeah, we just let that take over and kind of direct us.
Inward facing, yes, it's easy to work when you have four people that all trust each other and are largely on the same page, and they challenge each other in the best of ways. It's a wonderful synergy that rarely happens in creative practice, where just people get along. I mean, it's like the Beatles at their very best, and
no way. I don't like the Beatles.
But outward, like being the interface to most of the 250 plus people, the challenge is more about communication and setting expectations and managing the realities of launch delays and, hey, I sent you my materials a year ago and haven't heard anything yet. Oh yeah, we're still thinking about it, still talking. It's like we were on a very different time frame, and for some collaborators who made stuff or contributed in very material ways, they wanted to see the response immediately. The launch is next year, right? Yeah, no, in 2 years now. And so dealing with the realities of the material realities of fabricating this and getting it from our heads and from our sketches into something tangible, that was Herculean. The ability to spin a coherent meta level narrative for the form, yet have these subplots and stories within, is incredibly challenging. Dealing with people's expectations and managing hope and buy-in, and yes, we're still doing this, it's still exciting, and wrestling with the realities of this first venture to the moon. And we're payload, we're being carried. That's easy. The hard part is dealing with all the things I just mentioned, but being the provider, being the carrier, designing the lander, designing the vehicle that will, for us, be the backdrop in which our MoonArk will be discovered. And so there are, when you think of all the things to do and you list it out and you have the spreadsheet and it's pages and pages and pages, and there's people and emails and phone numbers, and every day you're on the phone for 6-8 hours talking to people, it gets tedious, it's laborious. But when you have a small group that you load share with and you can rely upon, it makes it more manageable. So to answer the question, yeah, it's massive. Getting anything to space is a massive effort, and we can't look past that. Getting 200, 300 people to collaborate is massive. But, in the right circumstances, with the right support and the right context, it can be done. And for us, it took years, and it took the very right people to come together at the right time for it to happen.
I think that the gift from Red and the gift from Astrobotics, in order to see this as something of value, is something that we very much internalized and felt a great responsibility to them. They are lifting the heavy weight here. They're doing the hard job. And so times when we get bogged down in updating, contracts with an artist, those kind of things, it came back to the privilege that they gave us and how hard they're working to make this happen. And just the great gift and appreciation that we had towards them for allowing this to happen. So we oftentimes, felt the responsibility to them as much to ourselves as being accountable to them and the opportunity that they've given us.
Yeah, that's really true. And then I think over time, as more people became involved with the project, you begin to feel responsibility for them, and I'm sure they do for us as well. So it just continues to build.
No, that was really excellent. Thank you guys so much. Okay, so according to the website, there will be an additional copy of MoonArk that will remain here on Earth for today's audiences to enjoy. Do you know where we could expect that artwork to pop up, or if you're not certain yet?
So this has been the fun thing, that we worked in a closet for multiple months and multiple years and didn't have much. As we were making this thing, we did it with the hope that it was going to be something special. And now that it's completed, it started to kind of travel around the globe. It went to Greece, Crete, for a conference. A big opportunity we had, the biggest, kind of changed our narrative for the project, was when Jean-Luc curated it to a show at the Pompidou in Paris. And, we got to go there and kind of, have a different conversation with a different group of people that was just so incredibly valuable for us. And so it's slowly been traveling around to different locations around the world, and hopefully it continues. So if you have any interest at your institution in having the MoonArk there, reach out. you can find us on our website. We'd be happy to travel there.
I'll add to that for about 18 months it was at the Carnegie Museum of Natural History on display. And so just to clarify too, that there are two versions of the MoonArk, and they're identical twin copies. One is aimed for the moon, one is aimed to stay here as a backup in case something happens, but also as a reference point. So, when you design something that's gonna outlive your lifespan and it could last for many, many, many generations, materially it could outlast language, right? So, we have to have a material connector here to point to the moon to say, hey, that this is the thing that's over there. Someone will discover it in the future. This thing here is a version of it that you can see and learn from. And I think the Earthbound copy is super important for keeping people, or I should say it differently, allowing people to speculate in a way. When you say you're sending something to the moon, it's easy for your mind to go into like aliens and sci-fi and Star Wars and things like that. But these are material traces that we collectively are leaving for our future selves. So we're telegraphing forward, and the presence of an artifact here as a display sample, as something that people can engage with, make it all the more real. And so we want people to dream and to consider this as potential, that as humanity reaches out into the solar system and we begin to inhabit different places and extend out into space further and further, we need to question, the ethics and the politics around that, but also, what are the cultural traces we're going to leave behind? What's worth preserving? What's worth saving? What's worth saying, and remembering for the future? And we don't have an answer for that. The MoonArk is one composition. It's an element in a larger narrative that's emerging. And if you look at the development of space art as a practice since the 1960s, there are many different takes on it, and MoonArk fits with the golden record on the Voyager, and some other elements too. But it's different. It's in many ways more complex because of the way it came together. It's not one person's vision, one person's authorship. It's a broad collective. It's in many ways a reflector of humanity. So if that's the case, then we want people to see their own humanity in the object they encounter here today. And so that's why the second copy is important. And as Dylan mentioned, it's been traveling around the world in various forms. So we'll send prototypes. Well, right now, prototypes and videos are being shown in Japan. Photographs and elements are going to be shown in Greenland. Photographs have been shown in Poland. And, but we've carried it places. We've taken it to New York and to San Francisco and to Greece and to Paris and so forth. And those interactions with people allow them to ask questions that they've never asked before. And I think that's a truly special nature of art, of cultural objects, of designed artifacts. It's that it opens a space for questioning in someone's mind, that it's more than the technical capability of getting to the moon or the material endurance of the thing to outlast humanity and so forth, but it's what are the messages and how did you say this and why is it in this form and what's the creative practice and how do I access that? How do I begin to think about these things in my own way and question my own existence and my own place in the world and our own place in the universe and so forth? So for the object to crack open that, in someone's mind a little bit, to begin to ask those questions, I think are really important. So as we spread out, across the planet and as a global society into the cosmos, we're projecting right now cooperation, collaboration, creativity and such, but there may be other messages that will complement this in the future. And so being part of this continuing larger narrative is really important for us.
And I think continuing is an important word. Like we knew from the get-go that like we weren't going to, be able to provide the answer and how to communicate humanity. That was not the point. And we also knew that we wouldn't be able to be, like ultimately inclusive as far as that's concerned. We weren't going to be able to represent, everybody and everything and, every type of idea that was out there. So it's a piece, it's a fragment that is a part of that continuing story to be told. So someone else can create something that's maybe similar to this to build from, what we've created, just as we have from what previous people have created.
We hope the MoonArk that stays on Earth allows you to kind of churn inward and kind of analyze, your own life and think about your own life. What opportunities do we have on a regular basis to kind of stop, getting off our phone and stop thinking about tomorrow or thinking about our investment plans or our bills that are due. Just step back and kind of analyze your own life and kind of your own human experience and get at the things that are valuable to you, these core truths that you that guide you. And we hope it kind of functions as an artifact. And, we don't want to overstate this. This isn't a replacement for the, the significant spiritual journey that, a lot of people, but can we make an artifact that makes you turn inward and think about what gives your life meaning? And we wanted it to be that. And so it was important for this artifact to be on Earth in order to kind of spark some of these conversations and start some of these conversations. And again, for some people, it could just be, oh, that's a beautiful object. But hopefully some of the questions that we asked that we tried to embed in there allow you to kind of churn internally and kind of ask those same questions to yourself.
Cool. Yeah, I didn't know that the Earth copy served that purpose as well, like for the people that are viewing it today, and then for the people that eventually discover the moon version of MoonArk thousands of years from now and have that additional copy to link it to. So that's really cool. All right, well, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
All right. If you would like to read more about MoonArk or check out the structure and its artwork, you can visit MoonArk's website at moonarts.org. Thanks for listening to the Arts Management and Technology Lab podcast series. You can read more on the intersection between the arts and technology at www.amt-lab.org. Or you can listen to more interviews and discussions in our podcast series on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, or Stitcher. Thank you for joining us.